When Dr. Martin Luther King delivered his inspirational "I Have a Dream" speech, approximately 250,000 people were present. Unfortunately, some of those people worked for the FBI, and it inspired them to launch, quote, one of the biggest surveillance operations in history. I am Dr. John Padfield, an engineer turned state representative turned business professor, and this is Business Reform, where we discuss issues at the intersection of business, technology, and society. In this video, we are going to focus on scandals involving the misuse of FBI surveillance and forensic technology and the negative impact those scandals have had on society. The U.S. Senate will soon vote on the confirmation of a new FBI director, and I thought it would be appropriate to take a look at the decades of scandals that have plagued the FBI for the past 62 years. This video will demonstrate the cultural rot, incompetence, and political agendas within the FBI didn't start with Robert Mueller, James Comey, or Christopher Wray, although I have seen no evidence of any of them fixing the problems. Think of this video as a list of things the incoming FBI director needs to ensure never happen again. Now let's return to that surveillance operation targeting Dr. King in 1963. According to a 2013 story in the Washington Post, the speech's impact on the FBI was first outlined in a 1976 report of the Senate Select Committee to Study Governmental Operations with Respect to Intelligence Activities, better known by its popular nickname, the Church Committee. The article states the FBI spying on King, which had no court authorization or oversight, stands as an example of domestic security gone to excess. The Church Committee's report found, quote, the FBI's program to destroy Dr. King as the leader of the civil rights movement entailed efforts to discredit him with churches, universities, and the press. To accomplish that goal, the FBI collected information about King's plans and activities, quote, through an extensive surveillance program employing nearly every intelligence-gathering technique at the Bureau's disposal. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover wrote in an August 30, 1963 memo, quote, personally, I believe in light of King's powerful demagogic speech that he stands head and shoulders over all the other inward leaders put together when it comes to influencing great masses. We must mark him now, if we have not done so before, as the most dangerous inward of the future in this nation from the standpoint of communism, the inward, and national security. The article continues, quote, the Bureau in December 1963 decided to expand its microphone and wiretap effort without telling Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy in, quote, a secret effort to discredit Dr. King and to neutralize him as the leader of the civil rights movement. The effort began in January 1964 and included installing microphones at hotels King visited. And what do you think the FBI did with all the information they gathered from recording Dr. King's phone calls and secretly recording conversations inside the hotel rooms where he was staying? If you guessed trying to blackmail him into ending his own life, you would be correct. The Church Committee confirmed the letter, although sent anonymously, was indeed sent by the FBI. This scandal ran from 1963 until Dr. King's assassination in 1968, and I am looking forward to seeing all of the declassified records about that assassination. Not that it makes it right or in any way better, but the FBI was not the only federal law enforcement agency to have a serious racist scandal. The Good Old Boys Roundup was an annual whites-only event run by agents of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms from 1980 through 1996. And what do ATF agents do at a whites-only Good Old Boy Roundup? Well, that was kept pretty quiet until July 1995 when a video surfaced of what was going on there. The video showed federal and local law enforcement officers wearing T-shirts with a photo of Dr. King on a shooting target and other T-shirts depicting O.J. Simpson hanging from a noose. The entrance to the event had a sign which read, Inward Checkpoint, but the main attraction was a racist skit by a law enforcement officer dressed as a Klansman who simulated a sex act on another officer in blackface. Yes, this event was paid for with our tax dollars, and as always, links to all of my sources can be found in the description of this video. But getting back to the FBI scandals, let's turn our attention to the world-renowned FBI crime lab. In April 2023, I made a video about a discredited FBI forensic technique called bullet-lead analysis. The FBI performed this analysis in criminal cases over 2,500 times between the early 1980s and 2005. The FBI claimed they could match a bullet retrieved from a crime scene to a box of bullets in a suspect's possession. However, in 2004, the National Academy of Sciences issued a report discrediting this technique and the way its results had been presented to juries by FBI examiners. 18 months later, the FBI announced it was discontinuing this analysis, but many people still sit in prison to this day after being convicted, at least in part, on invalid FBI evidence and expert testimony. A lot of what I'm about to share with you next came directly out of a 1997 Inspector General's report written by Michael Bromwich. This 574-page report is the result of an 18-month investigation by a Department of Justice Inspector General into allegations made by FBI Supervisory Special Agent turned whistleblower Dr. Frederick Whitehurst in 1994. Here are just a few excerpts from the executive summary of the report. Quote, "The types of problems we found included scientifically flawed testimony, inaccurate testimony by an explosives unit, testimony beyond the examiner's expertise, improper preparation of laboratory reports, insufficient documentation of test results, scientifically flawed reports, inadequate record management and retention systems, and failures by management to resolve serious and credible allegations of incompetence." But wait, there's more. On page 10 of the Inspector General's report, he wrote concerning the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, quote, "Among the many allegations framed by Whitehurst, he specifically accused Explosives Unit Examiner David Williams of misrepresenting the truth, testifying outside his area of expertise, and presenting testimony that was biased in favor of the prosecution. We concluded that Williams gave inaccurate and incomplete testimony and testified to invalid opinions that appeared tailored to the most incriminating result." And on page 14, there is a discussion of the testimony the Chemical Toxicology Unit Chief Roger Martz gave under oath in the O.J. Simpson case. Quote, "That testimony ill-served the FBI because it conveyed a lack of preparation, an inadequate level of training in toxicological issues, and a deficient knowledge about other scientific matters that should be within the expertise of a chief of a unit handling chemical and toxicological analyses in the lab." Also on page 14, there is discussion of testimony given by Explosives Unit Examiner David Williams in the Oklahoma City bombing case. Quote, "We concluded that many of the same errors committed by Williams in the World Trade Center case were repeated in the Oklahoma City case. Principally that Williams based some of his conclusions not on a valid scientific analysis, but on speculation from evidence associated with the defendants." All of this is just in the first 14 pages of a 574-page report. Now let's examine the role of the FBI in the 1992 armed standoff at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, and the 1993 trial of Randy Weaver and Kevin Harris. The FBI submitted photographs of the crime scene as evidence and testified about those photographs, but under cross-examination, the FBI admitted those photos had been staged. Most people would be prosecuted for that type of misconduct, but the FBI got off with a stern warning from the judge. The jury acquitted Weaver and Harris on the murder charges, but found Weaver guilty on the weapons charge. However, the FBI's blatant violation of rules of evidence and their numerous other acts of misconduct prompted federal judge Edward Lodge to issue a contempt of court order against the FBI and to fine them. The judge's order referred to the FBI's recalcitrance and stated the Bureau had evidenced a callous disregard for the rights of the defendants and the interest of justice, and demonstrated a complete lack of respect for the order and directions of the court. During the standoff, the FBI changed their rules of engagement to allow their sniper, Lon Horaruchi, to shoot Weaver on sight. In the most controversial rifle shot since the Texas School Book Depository in 1963, The FBI sniper claims he missed Randy Weaver and accidentally hit his wife Vicki in the head as she was holding her baby in her arms. The Department of Justice had to pay a $3.1 million settlement to Randy Weaver for killing his unarmed wife during the standoff. These videos take a lot of time and effort to create, so if you're enjoying this video, please consider sharing it on social media and forwarding it to anyone you know who may be interested. Now let's return to the FBI crime lab and take a closer look at their microscopic hair analysis. Throughout the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, the FBI analyzed hair recovered from crime scenes and compared it to hair from suspects to determine if the hairs were consistent. This was before DNA testing was commonly available. However, during this time, there was a growing body of evidence that this technique was flawed and/or being misrepresented to juries in terms of exactly what it means if a suspect's hair is, quote, consistent with hair recovered from a crime scene. Since 1992, the Innocence Project has helped free or exonerate over 250 people who have been wrongfully convicted. 52 of the people they have exonerated using DNA evidence were wrongly convicted, at least in part because of microscopic hair comparison testimony presented as evidence against them. Some of these innocent people spent more than 3 decades in prison before being exonerated. 7 of those 52 innocent people were sitting on death row. But again, it gets worse. According to an April 2012 article in the Washington Post, Justice Department officials had known for years that flawed forensic work might have led to the conviction of potentially innocent people. Officials began reviewing cases in the 1990s after reports that sloppy work by examiners at the FBI lab was producing unreliable forensic evidence in court trials. A follow-up Washington Post article written in July 2014 states, quote, nearly every criminal case reviewed by the FBI and the Justice Department as part of a massive investigation started in 2012 of problems at the FBI lab has included flawed forensic testimony from the agency. The findings troubled the Bureau and it stopped the review of convictions last August. Case reviews resumed this month at the order of the Justice Department. The inquiry includes 2,600 convictions and 45 death row cases from the 1980s and 1990s, in which the FBI's Hair and Fiber Unit reported a match to crime scene samples before DNA testing of hair became common. The 52 cases I mentioned earlier are just the ones where the Innocence Project have helped exonerate people wrongly convicted. As you can see, there could be many more innocent people still sitting in prison to this day due to sloppy work from the FBI lab. The investigation resumed after the Justice Department's Inspector General excoriated the department and the FBI for unacceptable delays and inadequate investigation in a separate inquiry from the mid-1990s. The Inspector General found in that probe that 3 defendants were executed and a 4th died on death row in the 5 years it took officials to re-examine 60 death row convictions that were potentially tainted by agent misconduct, mostly involving the same FBI hair and fiber analysis unit now under scrutiny. I don't know whether history is repeating itself, but clearly the latest report doesn't give anyone a sense of confidence that the work of the examiner whose conduct was first publicly questioned in 1997 was reviewed as diligently and promptly as it needed to be, said Michael Bromwich, who was Inspector General from 1994 to 1999. Allow me to translate that last statement for you. It means both FBI Director Louis Freeh and Attorney General Janet Reno failed to do their jobs to fix problems Inspector General Bromwich outlined in his 1997 report. I told you earlier, the cultural rot, incompetence, and political agendas didn't start with directors Mueller, Comey, and Wray. They just failed to fix any of it. In an April 2015 follow-up article in the Washington Post, the Justice Department and the FBI finally and formally acknowledged, quote, nearly every examiner in an elite FBI forensic unit gave flawed testimony in almost all trials in which they offered evidence against criminal defendants over more than a 2-decade period before 2000. Of 28 examiners with the FBI's Laboratory Microscopic Hair Comparison Unit, 26 overstated forensic matches in a way that favored prosecutors in more than 95% of the 268 trials reviewed so far. The cases include those of 32 defendants sentenced to death. Of those, 14 have been executed or died in prison. Let me read that again. 26 of 28 FBI lab examiners overstated forensic matches in ways that favored the prosecution in more than 95% of the 268 trials reviewed, and in 14 of those cases, the defendant had been executed or died in prison. With decades of flawed investigations and lab work that have resulted in the wrongful conviction and in some cases execution of innocent people, you will have to forgive me for feeling absolutely zero sympathy for FBI agents who are afraid of losing their jobs. In my opinion, in a just world, some of them should be more worried about prosecution than unemployment. Over the past 4 years, former FBI Director Christopher Wray has repeatedly warned us that Chinese hackers are planning to wreak havoc on U.S. critical infrastructure. That is good to know, but there is nothing actionable in his vague warning. My question is, what did Director Wray do to properly investigate those threats so appropriate actions could be taken to eliminate or at least minimize those risks? Over the past 4 years, he put over 5,000 FBI employees to work tracking down people for trespassing in the Capitol. He also assigned FBI agents to investigate parents who spoke up at school board meetings. In the description of this video, I have linked to a House Judiciary Select Committee report about how there was no legitimate basis for spending FBI resources harassing parents, and the report details just how much harassment the FBI engaged in against parents for simply speaking up. Director Wray also assigned FBI agents to go undercover and infiltrate Catholic churches to try and recruit informants. So where are all the stories about the success the FBI has had in thwarting Chinese hackers trying to take down our power grid or our water supply? I guess that might have been on his to-do list, but the 38,000 employees at the FBI were just too busy to properly investigate threats from Chinese hackers. The next FBI director certainly has their work cut out for them to try and fix the cultural rot, incompetence, and political agendas I've outlined in this video. But what do you think? Am I blowing things out of proportion? Do you trust the FBI as it stands today? Do you think it's salvageable? I can't wait to read your comments.